Hello and welcome to the Romance Track here at Continual. And tonight we are talking about why we love paranormal romance. What's behind our love affair with paranormal romance and all kinds of things spooky and spectacular. We're going to dive into that, but first let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Kiernan.
I'm Kiernan Kelly. I'm also Dakota Chase. That's my young adult pen name. I write GLBTQ romance across the genres, but I absolutely adore paranormal romance. Most of my stories involve the paranormal element.
Very good. And JL.
Hi, I'm JL Gribble. I got my start writing in the urban fantasy spectrum, and I am currently working on launching a spin-off series into the paranormal world. So look for Earth and Water in January.
Great. Melody?
Hello, I'm Melody Johnson. I write sci-fi romance, paranormal romance with my Nightblood series, and then I do some anthologies. And in my anthologies, my short story serial is Witchy Business. So paranormal there as well.
Cool. Layla?
Hi, I'm Layla Reyne. I write LGBTQ romance and romantic suspense, and as of the beginning of October, paranormal romantic suspense. I'm getting back to my fanfic roots and diving into the paranormal, and with the Soul Defined series and Icarus and the Devil.
Cool. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela Knight. I'm the author of the Magverse series, the Time Hunters series. Currently, I'm working on the Talent series. All of that stuff is paranormal romance. I think I've written one contemporary romance in something like 25 years. So yeah, I'm as paranormal focused as it gets.
Susan, how about you?
Hi, I'm Susan Griffith, one half of the Clay and Susan Griffith writing team. We've written, we do historical fantasy, but really it's romance. And Clay always kind of fights about it, but it's paranormal romance. I'm always slipping in the romance. We always have lean characters with the Vampire Empire series and the Crown and Key series, and soon to be the Monstrance series. So we've got always got romantic couples or multiple connections within all of our books. So, and that's mainly what I read. So I love every aspect of it.
Makes sense to me. Jeannie?
Oh, I'm so excited to be with some of my favorite authors, all of these wonderful paranormal romance authors. This is great. I love paranormal romance. I write it. I write urban fantasy, paranormal romance, paranormal romantic suspense, and space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott. And if I'm reading it, it's more than likely a paranormal romance.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. I think every story is improved with ghosts and monsters and magic in it, and I'm sticking to it. So, what is it that made you fall in love with reading and writing paranormal romance? There are so many different flavors of romance out there. What makes you come back time and again to the paranormal piece? Kiernan?
For me, it's that sense of otherness. It's the power that I think that is involved in most paranormal romances, whether it's on the hero side, or in my case, the hero side, or if you're writing MF on the female side, one or more of your characters is imbued with a special power that we as normal humans don't have. And I think that's very attractive to me, that sense of agency that we don't normally experience. And they're just fun.
Yeah.
They're so much fun.
This is true. JL?
I think that one of the things that has always drawn me to speculative fiction is that even when we're talking about vampires or monsters or aliens, we're still talking about people. And so it's fun to take different mythological and fantasy aspects and really stretch the definitions of humanity, especially when it comes to how people relate to each other, and especially when you involve romance.
Very cool. Melody.
I would say that some of my very favorite character archetypes and my favorite tropes just happen to fall into paranormal romance. I love strong heroines who can kick butt, and enemies to lovers romances where the hero is testing all of that spunkiness from our heroine. And paranormal romance just sets that to the highest level.
Very good. Layla. Oh, you're muted.
Yep. That made me think what you said, Melody, because like some of the first paranormal romance I read was Nalini Singh, right? And it has a lot of those tropes, like, you know, the enemies to lovers, the heroine who can kick butt. And those are a lot of things I like too, and really enjoyed it. And then I like, there are rules within the magic in your world, but there's not rules too, right? Like I didn't have to look at an FBI chart once and it was lovely, right? And so like getting to stretch those bounds and play in a different world is lovely, reading it or writing it.
What do you think, Angela?
For me, I think the appeal has always been world building. If when I write vampires or werewolves or whatever, I want to give it sort of a different twist because I think a big part for readers is discovering how this weird world works. Because everybody, even though there's tons of vampires and there's tons of shifters and things of that nature, everyone has a different set of rules. And that to me is the fun in discovering the rules.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I started when I was reading much younger, and I'm probably one of the older authors here. There wasn't a lot out there for women to really dive into. There was contemporary romances, there were historical romances. And I remember when I first read an Anne Stewart book that had a paranormal spin to it. Suddenly, everything was different, and it was that, you know, it's always the characters for me, but that sudden element of the paranormal that got thrown in with, I think they could like touch an object and she could, you know, read the history of it, and all of a sudden I was mind blown, and I was like, that changed everything for me, and I started searching just for those types of books. I still read everything because I was a reader, but what really attracted me with those little elements that kind of just gave the whole world of romance a new spin. It opened a whole new door to what could possibly be. And when I first read my first vampire romance, again, mind blown, because I was like, that is nothing. Always the vampires were evil in the, you know, because there was always male books that always had the villains as the vampires. And suddenly here we were introduced to someone who could possibly be something other. And it was amazing, and it really didn't matter what was going on. Those were the books I was gravitating towards, and still do. They still give me that thrill, that heart palpitation, that excitement that comes from finding those and writing those.
That makes sense. Jeannie?
Oh, what they all said. That's the only problem with going last. I think it's so many of those elements, and also one of the first vampire kind of quasi romances I ever read was Chelsea Quinn Yarborough's series, and I always thought, you know, to me the vampires are the bad guys, like Susan said. I mean, like, evil guys, right? And that was the first time I went, wait, other side to the story, whoa. And I had always read spec fic and loved that, and had not read romance, and so that sort of led me into reading, seeing if there was romance, there was more romance that was like that. And so I think it was a gateway drug, and I haven't looked back. So now read it, write it. Yeah. So, but so many good answers. I can't really top them.
Well, I cut my teeth on Dark Shadows. the old vampire soap opera. And of course, the main character there, Barnabas Collins, is, you know, he wants to be human again. He is hopelessly in love with the female doctor who's trying to cure him. There are a lot of love triangles and ghosts and witches and vampires and time travel. And, you know, I got all this through a fire hose before I was in elementary school. So, you know, we all understand now how I ended up the way I am. That kind of set the bar.
Speaking of gateway drugs.
Speaking of gateway drugs, yeah. And I think the other thing is, while I have read contemporary romance and enjoyed it, I like the extra meat of the story when there's a paranormal element, when there are monsters and magic and all this spooky stuff going on. It's just this extra layer of plot that goes beyond, you know, all the common tropes of misunderstandings and you know, reasons why people can't get together until they do. Those are all well and good, and like I said, I've enjoyed them, but I sink much deeper into the substance of it when there's more going on than just the back and forth of the romance, where the romance is part of the bigger thing. You know, like you're trying to make sure the guy didn't get bitten by a werewolf, as one does, that sort of thing. Now, people have touched on the world building and the some of the other elements, but when you're writing a paranormal, how does the paranormal piece of it affect the romance piece of it for you? Kiernan?
Me again. Okay. Let's see. That's a good question.
You're on my right-hand side in the Brady Bunch lineup, so I'm just going, you know, across the screen.
This is keep it simple. Okay. For me, the paranormal element is usually part of the conflict in my stories. It's going to come between the characters, unless they're both paranormals. And in that case, even then, sometimes, depending on what they are, it will come between them, and it'll be a moment of conflict to find out how they're going to work that into their relationship. You know, you know, the werewolf that changes in the full moon. How are you going to work those full moons into your relationship? The vampire that can't walk during the day. How do you fit that into your relationship? So there's, you know, the elements of the paranormal need to be overcome in order for the relationships to work in my books.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, mixed marriage in paranormal is really mixed sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
JL?
You know, I'm also a book reviewer, and a lot of what I review is paranormal romance or speculative fiction romance. And sometimes the hardest part of the review is figuring out whether what I read was a paranormal romance or whether it was an urban fantasy with a significant romantic subplot. And then we can get into all like the dissection of what genre means and all that stuff. But like, I'm going to call Layla out. Layla was my last culprit of, well,
Yeah, I don't know where that book fell technically.
I mean,
yeah,
I loved it regardless of how you want to describe it. But part of the fun of it is that, you know, it goes back to what I said earlier, which is that, you know, even if you've got vampires and shifters and witches running around, you know, the fact that you can still have a romance element as part of it is kind of just what makes it fit into like the broader human experience, which is what all stories should do anyway. So
Okay. Melody?
Yeah, my romance and my paranormal are very much intertwined. In my Nightblood series, my main character, Cassidy DeRocco, she is an investigative reporter. And she thinks she's looking into just a regular old murder. And what really is happening is she is gathering evidence and discovering the existence of vampires. And when she finally writes her article and reveals it to the world, the next day, nobody remembers because they're vampires and they can do all of their voodoo, which she is immune to, but she doesn't know why. And so all of that delicious battle that is a battle of wills that is about to emerge between herself and the master vampire Dominic, who she is trying by hook or by crook to force out of the closet, which he will not be having, is, you know, all coming to a head in that first installment of that book. So the paranormal of vampire and the romance of her being an investigative reporter and the murders are all smushed all together throughout the whole book.
Okay, Layla.
Yeah, so I mean, I gravitate toward romantic suspense, be it the contemporary or the paranormal. And so the paranormal aspect of that is just it's heightening everything, right? The romance and the suspense part of it. And so one's driving the other, and that's kind of how they're entwined, right? And that's the romance. And I love to hide the ball. And this is just another thing I can do to heighten the mystery, right? And the suspense. And then that also heightens the romance because someone doesn't know what's going on, right? And that goes to Kiernan's point about the conflict. When they do know what's going on, are they going to be able to accept it, use it to fight for whatever they're fighting for and for each other?
Angela?
Oh, well, for me, I think, well, one, all romantic conflict really comes down to trust. Can you trust this person not to hurt you? And if that person is a werewolf or someone that drinks blood or a vampire slayer when you're a vampire, that makes for a lot more intense conflict. And the conflict then is not who, I'm mad because I saw you eating dinner with a woman, and more, we have something where we are literally, and like you said, enemies to lovers. I mean, it was, or the conflict, when the conflict comes out of what the people are, I think that's I just think that's a lot stronger to write, and it's tough to solve, which, plus you also get, I like to use villains as matchmakers because it's like, we would normally not stay in the same area code, but we got to get this guy who's trying to kill us, and so he works very nice. The villains work really well for that. That's my thing.
Okay. Susan.
Yeah, since I work with my husband as a partner, it comes across a little bit differently for us. If it was just me, it would just be character, then world building, then setting, and it would just explode. But with Clay, he's a historian, so he sets the world. And while we're talking about it, I'll start like placing characters, like, oh, if you're going to have a vampire society up on the north in Scotland, ooh, we could have him be a vampire prince who's been like ousted from his family, and then we could have a girl who's in the like a young empress, thing, who's just starting to come up, but she's got the power to like kill all the vampires eventually, but she doesn't know it, and she's being trained to be like a super weapon, but she doesn't realize what the cost is going to be. And then, oh wait, then now they're kind of attracted to each other because he has to save her, but he's hiding his identity like a Scarlet Pimpernel. I mean, and my mind goes crazy, and suddenly he's going, wait, what? And it was just going to be a vampire world, and suddenly it's evolved. But that's what I love. I mean, all he's got to do is give me a couple of little concepts, and I'm like, ooh, and this is what we can do here, and this is how we're going to do it here. We've done that with all our books. The Kind of Key series a little bit differently because they were that world was given to us through Del Rey. That was a multimedia project, but like the Monstrance was different because I had the idea, and I was like, well, I want it to be in New York. I want it to be a magic club. I want it to be nightclubs in 1930s, and there's going to be thieves and relics that people use to cast their magic. And he's going, oh, okay, that's fine. How about this? And so we flip flop. But you kind of sometimes go with the characters for me. But when there's a world set up, like my husband can set up a world in about 5 minutes, and that's enough for me to just go crazy, probably to his chagrin, because he's like, wait, I haven't even gotten anything down yet. I'm still trying to get this soldier down. Like, yeah, now we're already past him. We're moving on.
You just need the nugget. You just need the nugget, and then you go.
Nugget. So it's a nice way because I could start populating very quickly into a world that's created for me. That's basically fan fiction, which I excel at. But even so, it's really the characters that fire me up. So once we get the world slightly built, and it could be very, very sparse, I can start putting those characters in and thinking how they're going, the conflicts are going to happen, how they're going to get together, why they're getting together, why would they stay together, and what could drive them apart at any moment. And so all that just slowly builds as you go.
Okay. Jeannie?
Well, I'm kind of in the same camp as Layla in that I like romantic suspense with my paranormal. And I think it just adds that layer of complexity. And as Angela said, it ramps up the conflict even more. You get not only, oh, great, we've got a murder to solve, but we've got all these paranormal elements, no matter which one you're using, that are either in the shadows, cannot be revealed, or are adding so much more damage that your sleuth or your couple who's ever trying to solve it, or whoever is the next target. I like that one much. It's my favorite. Let's make them the next target. They have barely time to catch up with themselves before there's another murder. And Angela, I love what you said about making the villain the matchmaker, because it is often the truth. It's like they would not be in the same area code or zip code or anywhere close to each other, dealing with each other, if it weren't for this villainy that was happening. But I think the paranormal aspects allow us as writers to add an element. I love contemporary romance, but it's ABC, right? There's meet cute, conflict, resolution, and that's great. Many storytellers tell wonderful stories that way. But as adding conflict with paranormal, you get the reader to stop and go, yeah, but is it going to be a happily ever after? Ooh, they know it is because it says romance on the spine, but we give them more. I don't know. I think we give them a little bit more to sink their teeth into, and wonder how are we authors going to pull this shit off?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everybody said, and sometimes I've got a person who doesn't have any paranormal abilities and is really skeptical about the paranormal, and for whatever reasons, usually solving a murder, they have to work with someone who claims to be a psychic or a medium and turns out really to be that. And you have that skepticism. Sometimes it's kind of an opposites attract things. When you have a fox shifter and a wolf shifter, well, it's not the way it usually works. Or a squirrel shifter who falls in love with somebody who's afraid of squirrels and isn't a shifter. That really takes some working on your relationship to get past. And I like that you can throw those kind of things in with a paranormal romance, or, the whole bit about dead, not dead. Well, okay, we need to work on this. I love that you can throw those complications in on top of all the ones that you usually have in, a non-paranormal romance, because those elements are often there too, whether it's age or difference in perspective or difference in background. Those are still there too, but then you've got this other stuff on top. And oh yeah, somebody's getting killed. I just like having all
my favorite.
That's right. And there's a ghost, my favorite. So I just, it's a bigger toy box. It's a bigger, there are more toys in the sandbox or whatever. It just gives me more things to play with.
And
So-
for every,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was saying for every toy, you can also turn it on its head even more, right? Like, oh no, it's the humans that are evil, not the paranormals, right? Like, there's just so much that you can flip on their head in this. That's great.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. And you can just play with some unusual pairings, and that's a lot of fun too. So what kind of creatures have you used in your paranormal romance, falling in love with each other? And what attracted you to pick that type of creature? Kiernan?
You're asking me.
That is an evil laugh, I'm telling you.
It is. There's a lot of ability in that.
She knows why, because I absolutely adore weird shifters. I am all about the weirdness. I have written all kinds of strange, I've written dino shifters. I have written dragon shifters, which are kind of commonplace right now, but that's my current series. We have both written fainting goat shifters, which,
Mhm.
okay, great minds think alike. Mine was paired with my fainting goat was with, I think it was with a Chihuahua shifter. I'm not, no, it was with a Corgi. I was with a Corgi shifter with my fainting goat shifter. So I've written lots and lots of different strange and odd pairings. That's my favorite. And I think it's kind of like similar to a contemporary writer who writes the big strong alpha and the small omega, or the big tough guy with the kind of quiet guy. It's those opposites attract. It's very tempting for me to write in that with that subtext, and to do it by using two different shifters who are on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Okay. JL.
So the funny thing about my urban fantasy series, which is finishing up, is that when I wrote the first book in the series, I intentionally framed some of the characters as like a rebellion against the whole, vampires falling in love with the human thing. And then as the series went on, some like romance stuff started slipping into the background of the books. So it's really funny that now I'm writing a spin-off where all the secondary characters are now going to get their happily ever afters. So the first one is an earth mage and a water mage, because obviously those things absolutely go together, which is actually the background romance in an earlier book in the series. And then after that, I'm going to move forward in time and do, the vampire and the human, which is cliche, but the vampire in question has been kind of a man horror for like 2,000 years. So him settling down is going to be a shock to his system. And then a vampire and an elf, and then two mages. And I think I'm describing Gray these days as like the humanoid manifestation of like ancient creature of like shadow who's just like trying to learn how to be human. So
Okay. Melody.
So I have done my Nightblood series is vampire on human, and then my I also have a sci-fi series where I do aliens. But for my witchy business series, I've had a lot of fun with playing with different types of witches. They all live in a small town, but each witch kind of has kind of like her own, I don't want to say specialty, because none of them are particularly very good at what they do. But the one, she helps her ex-boyfriend excise a ghost from his house, but he's a skeptic. So we've got skeptic and ghost whisperer. And then we've got my other witch who has visions, and she ends up pairing up with someone who she sees a very bad vision of. But when you see a flash of something, you don't really know the circumstances, you don't know, the background. So you could be a little misinformed on what you have seen. And then my most latest witch for an autumn embrace, in that story, she actually sees ghosts. She is blind, but the only thing she can see is ghosts. And so her pairing in that one is with a fellow witch who is a dark sorcerer, but he's terrible at what he does. He wishes he could be better at being bad. And he needs her to ask a question of one of his ancestors. So I have a lot of fun pairing their powers and making them, striving to do better with their powers as they attempt to help one another.
Okay. Layla.
Yeah, so Icarus and the Devil is a vampire and a phoenix. And I had a lot of fun with that because it is opposites attract to the extreme, right? Here's Walking Death and here's Walking Rebirth. But the characters, Icarus is the one who is steaming hot, and Adam is the one who is locked down and cold. right? And so like it was just fun playing with the juxtapositions. And then the other shifter that I wrote that folks seem to be like, why'd you choose that, was the coyotes. And part of that was that I started this in 2020, 2021, and there were coyotes roaming in San Francisco. There's shots, I'm sure most people have seen them, of the coyotes on the Golden Gate Bridge. They're around. They came out when no one else was around. And then we spent a year in San Diego on an open canyon, and they are everywhere. And so I got real familiar, unfortunately, with them and their behaviors. And, you know, so they found their way into the book as the hothead character that he'll eventually have his book too. But yeah. Yeah, Robin's getting a book. And so like, but you know, instead of having the more typical kind of wolf pack, which they're great, I just went with the coyotes because this is set in an alt San Francisco and alt California. And that's what we've got.
Okay, Angela.
I had this, I've written a lot of stuff, but I think my favorite of my current crowd, I wanted to do shifters who didn't shift. So what I had is I would have, you'd have a guy form a psychic bond with a tiger or a lion or a bear, and then working together, they could create like a magical shell around the man in the shape with the strength of that animal. And they used it in combat. Well, the problem is if you get killed in combat, if the animal dies, the animal winds up trapped in the human's body. But if the human dies, he gets trapped in the tiger's body. So I came up with the idea for a character, which was basically what would happen if you trapped Robin Williams in the body of a tiger. And I wrote this, which, you know, and I wanted to give him a happy ending because he was recurring throughout my books. And I worked for years to try to figure out how to give him an HEA. Because one, tigers have a relatively short lifespan. And this guy I knew he'd be dying. And I needed to solve that problem. And I also needed to solve the people he always was making these kind of suggestive jokes to people, and they'd go, you know, particularly to women, he was hitting on women all the time, and they'd go, ooh, too many legs. So that was kind of, but you know, and they thought that was a joke. He did not consider it a joke. It hurt, but he was not going to say that because and I wanted to get him a woman in the body of a tiger, and I could not get it to work. And finally, I just said, well, he can create a magical shell that's human. So why not have him form a relationship with a woman? But you've also got a lot of people who are really like very religious and who view him as one, demon possessed, and two, that's bestiality. And so there's all these social issues with him and this woman having a relationship, and they're on a reality TV show too, which I've got this whole thing going where the guy that put the reality show together is a billionaire who is bored, and he wants to run for president of leading the bigot party, but he knows that if they're not going to, because he's always been a constitutionalist, which in this world, you know, is people that are for the rights of people with magic. And so he was trying to set this up, and it was all part of a big political machination. And so everything goes rapidly to hell at that point. But that is probably my favorite book that I've written in years, because it was just so much fun to put together. I love my heroine because she is really powerful, but you know, her magic is kind of screwy, and he helps stabilize her magic. So it was enormous fun to write.
Okay. Susan?
I mean, our first one is probably always going to be my favorite. It was vampires, and I was not a horror buff and Clay is more the horror buff for us. So when we decided on vampires, I was kind of like, I don't know. And it was just the way we finally set the vampire prince up in an empty castle full of cats, and those little elements that we started giving to him, that he was, his library was the Empress has the Library of Alexandria, because that still existed, and his is like a chest of books that he's been collecting over the years. So it's the little elements that you give to these characters. And so the vampire for me was how to make him accessible. Here's a 100 to 300-year-old vampire. How do you make that accessible to your heroine? And how do you, she's basically going to destroy all vampires on the earth. And yet he's willing to give his life for her, even though it means the destruction of his kind in the midst of this war. He's like, I love her. She is like the most, pure thing I've ever seen. She loves books. I love books. She has this ability that can destroy everything, but I don't care. I'm willing to sacrifice my people who are horrible creatures that have herds and suck, humans dry, that he's willing to do this. And those kind of sacrifices, that amount of trust. And, he doesn't even tell her for like the first third of the book because he's masquerading as a human. How do you find that level that you're willing to reveal yourself and, to a woman who can basically kill you with a thought? So it was really an amazing introduction into the horror element, and yet still have a romance in the very midst of it, that I found so intriguing. I mean, we've played with werewolves. We've had a werewolf hunter with a werewolf child, which wasn't a romance, but that dichotomy, that element of trust, is always the most sweetest of conflicts. We've had magic users where the Crowning Key series was an alchemist, and I love that she didn't have any powers, and that she's willing to try and find a connection to fight this evil. And she brings in this guy that she really doesn't think is worth the time, that he's going to step up to the plate and become this great sorcerer. And she's not believing it, but she's willing to form this team. And when she sees what he is capable of being, and that he does have a depth to his character, and those were great tropes to play with. And those kind of elements are still kind of my favorite, that they have that push and pull, that you really don't know how this is going to fix. How is this ever going to work? How is this ever going to come to a conclusion? There is no good conclusion. We still haven't found a conclusion for our vampire empire. I don't know how that's going to end. Eventually it will, but even I don't know how it's going to work. And I love that. I love that element of, like, I want to make it work. And Clay's going, oh yeah, this is doomed. This is a doomed romance. I'm like, oh no, it's not. We're going to fix this. We're going to find a way. So, and that kind of thing is still my favorite. Vampire will always be my favorite, just because it was my first true romance trope. But there's so many other elements that you can play with. But that's my first one, and still remains my favorite.
Jeannie?
Oh gosh, I love them all, but my favorite probably has to be Witches. My Witches Walk series is one of my favorites, and as Gail knows, it's morphed into also being in the Caneham Castle series, and people from my Massachusetts town of Haven Harbor end up populating this castle in England half the time because of the continuing the Caneham Castle series. But I also, as Melody was referring to, I also used aliens in my urban fantasy. And I think, just having those complexities, like we were all talking about, something about why we add the paranormal element, having that extra push-pull and finding those ways to redeem someone when they don't seem like they're redeemable, or, the standard trope of the vampire is the bad guy and you suddenly have to make him or her a good guy. It's just so much fun. But the witches, I really love that, because there's so many ways, as Melody was talking about, you can have different types of witches. And in my case, some of the time it's a believer and a not believer. Some of the times it's I'm on the periphery of this whole thing, kind of as a sort of a muggle, but maybe not. And then I meet somebody who brings my powers out. And so I've done a bunch of variations on that, and earth witches versus fire witches versus, and bringing that all and still keeping it all hidden. Isn't that the fun part? So I think that, you know, that I would probably have to say of the ones I've done, which I've got ghosts in there and I've got some demons in there. Why not throw a good demon in now and again, right?
Mhm.
But I still would have to say the witches are my favorite. So, and Gail, you've got all sorts of stuff.
I did write Fainting Goats in Love. It's actually a fainting goat and a very studly boar goat. If you've ever seen a boar goat, they're much stockier with big neck, and you know they're a studly goat. And then I've got kind of this twinky fainting goat, and they're quite the combination. So the shifter thing is fun because my Fox Hollow series is about a place that is a haven for misfit shifters and psychics. And so, you know, there's a story about a beaver and an otter that fall in love, and a raccoon and a possum. And
That's one of the best.
those are a lot of fun. I also just love writing in psychics and mediums and necromancers and people with magic, and having to, I've got a medium who falls in love with a ghost. So that meant figuring out ghost sex. It can happen. So I think that's the challenge to me, is if you've got these two people who are really different in some fundamental way, more than just the, you know, do you put ketchup on your hot dog or mustard? Are you dead and am I alive? You know, do you turn fuzzy on the weekend? Am I, you know, can I live with this? Am I allergic to you? You know, I think you have some deeper fundamental issues there. And so those are a lot of fun to play with too. Well, folks, we have blown through our time. We always do this. So before we wrap up, I want to go around quickly and give everyone a chance to say where we can find you online. And then if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, to tell us about that. Kiernan?
You can find me at KiernanKellyBooks.com. You can also find me on Facebook as Kiernan Kelly, and in my Facebook group, Kiernan's Little Monsters. I have some presence in TikTok, but not much. And I do have a new release that's out. It's called Dare to Dream. It is the second book in my Dragon Island series. I was telling you before about the Dragon Shifter series I'm writing. It's also MPreg, which gives another layer to the cake. And I have a couple of new releases coming out. I have Pumpkin Patch, which comes out at the end of the month for Halloween. It is a lesbian Summit Springs story. I also have a tentacle romance coming out in December called Jingle Bells and Elder Gods, and that releases on December 8th.
Nice. JL?
You can find my review blog at jlgribble.com, in which the majority of the books that are reviewed, unless they're arcs that I got my grubby little hands on, are usually paranormal or spec fic romance of some flavor. I reviewed Icarus and the Devil the day that it came out, because that was when I got my grubby little hands on. I was very excited. And then the first paranormal romance is coming out in January. That is Earth and Water, and that is the first book in the spin-off series to my urban fantasy series, which has lots of romance subplots, of which the final book in that, Steel Legacy, will also be coming out sometime in 2024. The first one of that is Steel Victory.
Okay. Melanie?
You can find me online, authormelodyjohnson.com. I am on most social. I'm on Facebook a lot, Instagram a lot, trying my hand at TikTok. My books, the Nightblood series I talked about, the first book in that is The City Beneath. That's the vampire series. I've got Aliens, my Love Beyond series. The first book in that is Beyond the Next Star. And my most recent release for full-length novels is the book 2 in that series, which is Sight Beyond the Sun. And both of those are alien abduction books, and lots of world building. And then my newest release is an anthology, An Autumn Embrace. And then that short story, that's the one where I had talked about, where the heroine is a witch who's blind, but she can see ghosts.
Okay. Layla?
Yep, you can find me online at www.laylareyne.com, at Layla Reyne on pretty much all the socials. The newest release is Icarus and the Devil. It's book 1 of the Soul to Find series, and there will be a free short story coming out in mid-October in the series. That's a little bit more of a sprinkling of the world before Paris and the Reaper comes out next year.
Okay, Angela.
Yes, my website is www.angela's nights, both of those with S's, no punctuation.com. You'll find me mostly these days at Changeling Press is where I got a lot of my stuff. I've got a book coming out in December called Arcane Betrayal. And I've got that will be sort of Christmas book, if you could call it that, and with terrorism. But and I'm on Facebook.
Going with the Die Hard theme.
I'm going with and you'll find me at Facebook and YouTube and you know, and as I said, at Changeling.
Okay, Susan.
You can find us at clayandsusangriffith.com. You can find both of us on Facebook. We're very active on Facebook individually. There's also our writing one. I'm also on Blue Sky. I think Clay just got on Blue Sky also, but I think he spelled his name wrong, but it's all right. It's just normal for Clay. But you could you just type in Clay Griffith, you'll still find him. We're on, I think that's about it that we're probably the most active on. I'm not active on TikTok. I have to, that takes a courage I'm not ready for yet, but I know it's coming because we'll have new books out. So this is going to be a whole new world of promoting, but we've got a new story out with the Tales from Stolke's Hall, which is a Viking role-playing game from Lou Anders, and I'm working on a Monstrance, which is that 1930s nightclub with magic users with a hidden world of magic. And I think Clay's working on a Grizzly Manor mystery story. It has a grizzly. That's it's fun. It's be just a little bit different than what we're going to be normally doing, but it's going to be a great fun.
Okay, Jeannie.
Well, you can find me at jeanneadams.com and on most socials. I'm still on the Hive and Scum and Villainy that is formerly known as Twitter, but perhaps not for too much longer. My last release was Valentine's. Let's see, Love and Kisses. Was it Love and Valentine's? Love and Valentine's. Gotta look at you. You'd think I'd know my own release, but no. Love and Valentine's at Kingdom Castle. And the next thing coming out for me is in the Mercedes Lackey anthology, Anything with Nothing, that comes out in November.
Okay, I'm pretty easy to find at GailZMartin.com, MorganBrice.com. I'm on pretty much all the social medias under one or both of those names. So if you spell them right, you'll find me. New release, the newest one, as Morgan Brice, is Roustabout, which is in the Carnival of Mysteries series. The next one is Signs and Wonders, which is in the Witchbane series. I'm taking part in a number of Halloween and holiday promotions. So you'll find an exclusive short story, Sweet Ghost of Mine, in the Twist in the Tail group promotion project that's running all through October. And I've also got Shelved, which is a Fox Hollow flash fiction in Coastal Magic's Funk and Fiction special for Halloween. And then there'll be more stuff coming up after that. Well, folks, thank you so, pardon?
I forgot about that. I'm in that too.
Well, folks, pardon me. Thank you so much for being wonderful, wonderful panelists. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more romance coming up on Continual. So we'll see you online.